James Whitmore stepped off the private jet into the soft, humid morning air of Savannah, Georgia. The sun hadn't yet crested over the historic rooftops, but the scent of river water and magnolia was already thick. The black car waiting at the edge of the tarmac felt routine. So did the driver's polite nod. Everything in James's life was predictable, elegant, polished, and hollow. His week was stacked with handshakes and headlines, ribbon cuttings, charity galas, a keynote at the Savannah Preservation Society where he'd be praised for restoring buildings he barely remembered approving. But today, something tugged at him. Not nostalgia exactly, more like unease, or maybe fatigue from holding up a life built to impress everyone but himself. "Drive through the historic district," James told the driver. "No rush." The driver glanced in the mirror. "Yes, sir." Savannah's streets unrolled like a memory, cobblestone lanes, wrought iron balconies, trees dripping with Spanish moss. James hadn't set foot here in 2 decades. Not since Rachel left. Not since Grace disappeared. His hand tightened slightly on the armrest. He spotted a small diner tucked between an antique store and a faded bookstore. It looked out of time, painted seafoam green with a porch swing out front and a single wooden sign that read, "Gigi's Place." A few locals sat under the awning, sipping coffee and talking low. It didn't belong on any curated list, and that was the point. "Stop here." The driver looked surprised. Here James was already opening the door. "I'll text when I'm ready." He stepped inside, and the air changed. The kind of place where the smell of bacon and biscuits lingered in the floorboards, where people said mornin' without checking your last name first. The waitress behind the counter was scribbling something on an order pad, her hair twisted up in a loose bun, an old soul kind of look to her. Then she turned, and James's entire world paused. She was laughing at something a customer had said, a soft sound that filled the space like sunlight through blinds. Her face was bright open and achingly familiar. His eyes dropped instinctively to her shoulder. And there it was. A faint, crescent-shaped birthmark just beneath the short sleeve of her uniform. He sat down hard in the nearest booth. "Coffee?" she asked, stopping at his table with a practiced smile. "We've got strong, decent, and drinkable." His voice caught before he could respond. She waited, one brow raised, pen poised. "Sir, yes, please." He cleared his throat. Black. She poured it herself from the carafe at the counter, brought it back, and set it gently in front of him. She was quick, efficient, and didn't linger. She had no idea. No idea who he was. No idea who she might be. James barely touched the coffee. He watched her move from table to table, refilling mugs, taking orders, laughing quietly with the regulars. She moved like someone used to holding the weight of others without letting it show. Grace would be 25 now. This woman was about that age. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thin leather wallet. Tucked inside behind the crisp business cards and VIP credentials was a worn photo. A toddler with dark curls and eyes full of fire. Rachel had taken it the day they planted a peach tree in the backyard, back when life still had room for dirt under fingernails and Saturday pancakes. He looked up. The waitress Callie, he heard someone say, was pouring sweet tea for an older woman in a pink cardigan. She bent slightly to hear her nodding with real interest. Her eyes sparkled with warmth, and her voice lured. Even her voice carried Rachel's tone, that low melodic rise at the end of a sentence. Callie. James whispered the name under his breath, trying it on like a suit that might or might not fit. He stayed longer than he meant to, ordered a biscuit just to justify it. She brought it over with a wink. "Best in town," she said. "Don't argue." He smiled. "I wouldn't dare." Her eyes narrowed, playful. "You ain't from here." "No," he admitted, "but I used to be." "Well, welcome back," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Savannah's still got its ghosts, but the food's warm and the gossip's better." Then she walked off to tend another table. James stared after her, barely breathing. He reached for the biscuit, not to eat it, but for the napkin underneath it. Folded it slowly, slipped it into his pocket. The linen held traces of her fingerprints of her skin cells. Franklin would know what to do. He didn't believe in signs, but this was too much to ignore. Outside, the driver raised his eyebrows as James slid back into the car. "Everything all right?" Sir James looked straight ahead. "Take me to the Whitmore building." He stared out the window, barely seeing the city. His phone buzzed a reminder about the gala guest list. He dismissed it. Instead, he opened a blank text to Franklin. "Need a DNA test. Quietly. Urgently. Use the courier. You'll get the sample in an hour." He hesitated, then added, "If this is real." "I found her. He didn't send it yet. Not until he was sure. Not until the napkin had spoken." But his chest ached in that sharp, familiar place. That old wound, long scarred over, had just begun to bleed again. Somewhere behind him, in a diner filled with coffee and comfort, a young woman wiped down a table and hummed a tune that James hadn't heard in over 20 years. She didn't know she was his daughter. Not yet. But if he was right, if fate had handed him this impossible moment, then everything was about to change. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The Whitmore building loomed over Savannah's skyline like a quiet monument to everything James had gained and everything he'd lost. He stood in his top-floor suite, hands in his pockets, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window. The city looked peaceful from up here. Small. Manageable. But nothing about this morning felt manageable. He could still see her face. That smile. That slight tilt of the head when she listened. Just like Rachel. Just like Grace. He ran a hand over his face. 22 years. When Rachel left, she'd said nothing. No notes, no phone calls. Just vanished. The courts couldn't help. The private investigators turned up nothing but cold trails and dead ends. And through it all, he'd built higher, worked harder, poured everything into projects, towers, and awards, until he convinced himself that filling the silence was enough. Until today. His phone buzzed. A message from Franklin. Courier picked up. Results in 72 hours. James exhaled and placed the phone on the desk, deliberately turning it face down. He didn't want news yet. He needed time to think, to remember. And the memories came faster than he expected. Grace at 3 chasing fireflies in the backyard of their old Savannah home. Rachel in the doorway laughing, calling them both inside for cobbler. James late again from the office, promising he'd make up for it with a weekend trip he never booked. Arguments that started small and ended with slammed doors and sleepless nights. And then one morning, nothing. No daughter, no wife, just a half-drunk cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, and a silence so sharp it cut. He never forgave himself for not seeing it coming. The knock on the door broke through the quiet. Franklin stepped in without waiting for a response, the kind of man who had been around long enough to do that. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Franklin said gently. "I might have," James replied. Franklin took a seat across from him. "Tell me what happened." James paced. "She looks exactly like her. Everything, the voice, the eyes, even the birthmark. Same spot, same shape. And she has no idea who you are." "None." He shook his head. "She called me sir, offered me coffee like I was any stranger, and I just sat there, staring like a fool." Franklin folded his hands. "So what now? I don't know," James admitted. "I don't want to scare her off. I need time, answers. I need to know if it's really her, And if it is James turned back to the window, then I've missed more than 20 years of her life, and she's grown up without a father because of me." Franklin said nothing. There was nothing to say. James's gaze drifted toward the horizon. The sky was beginning to darken into early dusk, the same soft orange glow that used to light the windows of their old home just before bedtime. He hadn't driven past that house in years, but suddenly, he needed to. Porcenaswum. Meanwhile, back at Gigi's, Callie wiped down the counter with quick, practiced strokes. The afternoon lull had settled in, and she took a minute to stretch her back. The place was quiet, except for the soft buzz of a radio playing Patsy Cline in the background. Shayla leaned on the server's station watching her. "You all right, honey?" Callie nodded, then hesitated. "Did you see that man earlier?" The one who came in sat at table 6. The one who looked like he belonged in a magazine ad for expensive cologne. Shayla smirked. "Yeah, I noticed." "There was something weird about him," Callie said. "He stared at me like I reminded him of someone." "Maybe you did," Shayla said gently. "Folks carry ghosts. You might have walked right through one of his." Callie looked down at her arm where the crescent birthmark sat just above the elbow. She'd always thought it looked like a little moon. Aunt Dee used to kiss it and say, "The sky marked you special, baby girl." She shook the thought off. "Anyway," she said, grabbing a tray, too rich to be real, probably lost. But something lingered in her chest. That look in his eyes. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't awkwardness. It was something heavier, almost like recognition. By evening, James stood across the street from a white craftsman-style house tucked between 2 massive oaks. The paint had faded, and the yard had grown wild, but he'd know that porch anywhere. He'd built that swing. They'd picked out the window boxes together. He didn't go up. He didn't even get out of the car. He just sat there remembering what it felt like to come home to it, to hear a child's feet running down the hall, to hold Rachel's hand in the doorway after Grace had gone to sleep. There had been love here, and he'd ruined it by never being fully present. A motion in the window caught his eye. A soft silhouette moved past the curtain. An older woman. Could that be the aunt, the woman Rachel had once mentioned in passing? He took a deep breath. No knocking. Not yet. He drove away slowly, the wheels crunching gravel, the past rising behind him like fog. That night, Callie sat at the small table in Aunt Dee's kitchen, nursing a chipped mug of tea. Dee moved slowly, her joints stiff from age, but her presence still filled the house with warmth. "Long day," Dee asked, settling in across from her. "Mm-hmm." Callie nodded. "Had a strange customer?" Oh, Callie hesitated. Felt like he knew me? Or thought he did. He stared at me like I reminded him of someone he lost. Dee's hands paused on her mug. She blinked carefully. "Do you ever think about my mama?" Callie asked quietly. Dee looked up slowly. "All the time." "What was she like?" Fierce Dee said. "Smart, brave, soft-spoken unless it mattered. She loved you more than anything." Callie looked down. "Why didn't she stay? Why didn't she tell me more?" Dee's voice softened. "Sometimes people leave because they're scared. Not because they don't care, but because they believe it's the only way to protect what they love." Callie nodded, but her throat was tight. She'd stopped asking questions about her mother years ago. Dee had always said enough to comfort, never enough to answer. Tonight, those old questions stirred again. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere across town, a man who once held her as a baby lay awake in a penthouse, wondering how to step into a life he'd lost without breaking it further. Neither of them knew what the next few days would bring. But something had shifted, and the past was no longer content to stay buried. Morning light filtered through the windows of Gigi's place, casting soft stripes across the tile floor. Callie moved behind the counter like clockwork, grabbing orders, topping off coffees, slipping warm plates onto tables with the ease of muscle memory. But her mind was elsewhere. She kept glancing at the door, not even realizing it. Shayla noticed. Expecting someone, she asked, smirking as she wiped down the pastry case. Callie blinked. What, no? Shayla raised an eyebrow. You've looked at that door more times than the wall clock. Callie laughed it off, but the flutter in her chest betrayed her. She couldn't shake him. The man from yesterday, James. He'd sat in her section, quiet and intense, like he was searching for something in her face. And when she brought his coffee, he looked at her like he already knew her. She didn't believe in fate. But something about the way his eyes locked on hers, it felt like a thread being pulled from a place she didn't know existed. At 9:12 a.m., the door opened, and just like that, he was back. James stepped in wearing a tailored navy jacket and no tie more casual than the day before. His presence shifted the air again. Not flashy, not loud, just certain. Callie froze for half a second, then caught herself and straightened up. Well, look who's back, she said, grabbing a menu even though she knew he wouldn't need it. I couldn't stay away from those biscuits, James replied with a half smile. She led him to a booth near the window. Your usual, please. She brought him his coffee and paused for a second longer than necessary. You passing through town, or? He looked at her carefully. I grew up here. Haven't been back in a long time. Business, she asked, but her tone held more than casual curiosity. Yes, and other things. She nodded, not pushing. James watched her move back to the counter where she leaned in to whisper something to Shayla, who laughed and rolled her eyes. Callie smiled bright and easy. It hit him like a wave how natural she was, how full of life. He thought about all the milestones he'd missed. She would have had her first heartbreak already, her first job, her first apartment. He wondered if she'd been scared when Rachel passed, if she'd cried alone or had someone to hold her. The ache in his chest tightened. Shayla approached his table a few minutes later with a knowing look. She's got questions, you know, she said, sliding him a refill. Callie. She won't ask, but she's wondering why a man like you keeps showing up in a place like this. James met her eyes. What would you say if I told you I might be her father? Shayla's hands paused on the pot, her lips parting slightly. I'd say, you better be right. I'm waiting on confirmation. She studied him. I don't know your story, but I do know Callie. She's the kind that pours herself into people even when there's not much left for herself. If you're gonna drop a truth like that, make sure you've got something real to back it up. He nodded. I won't hurt her. You don't have to mean to, she said quietly. James was still thinking about that when Callie returned with his plate. She slid it in front of him, then sat across from him without asking. He looked surprised. You said you grew up here? She said. Whereabouts? East 41st Street, 2-story house with blue shutters. She smiled. My aunt and I live near there. Tiny white house with creaky steps. James's heart lurched. That your mother's sister Callie shook her head. She's not blood. Just the woman who raised me when my mom passed. I'm sorry, James said softly. Callie nodded. It's been a few years. Still feels fresh sometimes. But Aunt Dee, she's everything. Stronger than most people I know. She sounds like a good woman. She is. A beat of silence stretched between them. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. Can I ask you something, she said. Of course. Did I remind you of someone? When you first saw me, James looked straight at her. Yes. She waited. My daughter. I haven't seen her since she was very young. You have her eyes. Her birthmark. Callie blinked. Her birthmark? A small crescent right below the shoulder. Her hand instinctively brushed the spot just under her short sleeve. Huh. Yeah, I've always had it. James didn't push further. He couldn't. Instead, he said, she would have been about your age. Callie's voice was quieter now. What happened to her? He exhaled slowly. Her mother left. Took her. I spent years looking, but nothing ever came up. I'm sorry, she said. He gave a small nod. Me too. There was something heavy in the air now. Callie glanced toward the kitchen, suddenly unsure of herself. I should get back to work. Of course. But she lingered a moment longer, as if wanting to say more. Then she stood and walked away. James watched her disappear into the back. His heart was racing, and yet everything felt still. There was no going back now. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Something had started here, whether the test confirmed it or not. And if she was Grace, he wasn't just looking at a waitress with a familiar face. He was looking at a lifetime. A whole life he missed. And a second chance he wasn't sure he deserved, but knew he couldn't walk away from. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1, to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows of James's hotel suite, a rhythmic whisper that matched the pace of his thoughts. The sky over Savannah had darkened, casting the city in a moody gray that seemed to press on the glass. James stood with his phone in one hand, staring at the message he had drafted but hadn't yet sent. She matches every detail. The voice, the face, the birthmark. I need the truth. We may already have it. Let me know the second the results come in. His finger hovered over the send button. Then he hit it. Some truths couldn't be kept waiting anymore. He crossed the room, poured a finger of bourbon, then stopped himself and poured it back. His nerves didn't need numbing. They needed clarity. He needed to stay sharp, present. If this was Grace, if she really had been standing across from him yesterday, laughing at his biscuit joke and wiping down tables like nothing had ever been taken from her, then everything he'd built had been built on the wrong foundation. His empire meant nothing if his daughter had lived without knowing she had a father who never stopped looking. Across town, Callie tucked a towel around her damp hair and stepped barefoot into the kitchen. Aunt Dee sat at the table in her usual spot, a half-finished crossword in front of her, and a kettle steaming gently on the stove. You work too hard, Baby Dee said without looking up. You've been dragging your feet all day. I'm just tired, Callie replied, pulling down 2 mugs from the cupboard. Dee gave her a look. Not tired, troubled. Callie poured the tea slowly. I met someone at the diner. Dee's eyebrows lifted just slightly. Well now, someone new. He's older. In his 50s, I think. Real put together. Wealthy, too, but there's something about him, Dee. The way he looks at me, it's like he knows me. Dee didn't speak. He said I reminded him of his daughter, Callie added. Said she disappeared when she was little, that her mother took her. Dee's spoon clinked against the mug as she stirred. Callie noticed. You okay? Dee nodded slowly. Just memories. It's a small world, Sugar. People carry their grief with them. Maybe you looked like someone he lost, that's all. I know, Callie said. But he noticed the birthmark. The one on my arm. Dee's eyes flicked to Callie's shoulder just under the sleeve of her t-shirt. That moon-shaped mark had always been there, like a fingerprint from the sky. A quiet part of Dee had always wondered if someone else would recognize it. And now someone had. Callie sipped her tea. He wasn't creepy. He was kind. Sad, too, and I don't know. It just felt important, like I was supposed to meet him. Sometimes feelings lie, Dee said softly. Yeah, and sometimes they don't. Dee didn't answer. She stared down at her crossword pen, resting lightly in her hand, and for the first time in years she couldn't fill in a single blank. The next morning, James was already at the diner by 7:15. He didn't want to wait. He sat at his usual booth by the window, tapping his fingers against the ceramic coffee cup like a metronome. The door chimed behind him, and when he looked up, she was there. Callie, hair tied back, eyes still soft from sleep. She didn't smile like she had before. Her expression was curious, now guarded. "You're early," she said, setting down the pot. "I didn't want to miss you." She poured his coffee. "Are you always this persistent? When something matters, yes." She slid into the booth across from him without asking. "Can I ask you something? Personal? Please, if your daughter was taken, why didn't you find her?" James felt the weight of her words settle in his chest like a stone. "I tried," he said. "For years. I searched, hired investigators, followed leads that went nowhere. Her mother was smart. She knew how to disappear. And he stopped. I was young, obsessed with work, with success. I thought I had more time." Callie's voice was quiet. "But you didn't." He looked at her eyes, suddenly tired. "No, I didn't." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that carries weight and meaning. "I lost my mom when I was 8, Callie said. "She got sick. Aunt Dee raised me after that. She never said much about my mom's past, just that she loved me more than anything. She must have been a good woman," James said. "She was. I barely remember her face, but sometimes I dream of her singing. I think it was a lullaby." James inhaled sharply. "What kind of lullaby?" Callie's brow furrowed. "I don't know. The words are always blurry. But there's this little part, like humming, slow and soft." He felt like the room tilted for a moment. "Was it this?" he asked, and began humming. A slow, simple tune. A melody he hadn't touched in 2 decades. The one he used to sing to Grace when she couldn't fall asleep. He'd made it up, no lyrics, just a tune from his heart. Callie froze. Her eyes widened. She didn't say anything, but something in her face cracked open. A memory recognition pain. James stopped humming. "I used to sing that to my daughter when she was a baby." She stared at him. "I've never told anyone about that song." He nodded, his voice a whisper. "You didn't have to." Tears welled at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, standing up. "I need a minute," she said, and walked toward the back, disappearing through the kitchen doors. James stayed frozen in the booth, barely breathing. He hadn't meant to let it slip. He was going to wait for the results, for proof. But that melody, how could she know it unless she'd heard it before? Franklin's voice echoed in his mind. "You better be right. God help him." He was. But what he'd just seen in Callie's eyes wasn't comfort. It was confusion. Fear. A wall she didn't know was about to crumble, and James realized, maybe for the first time, the truth wasn't going to heal everything. It might just break her first. Aunt Dee was in the garden when Callie got home. The air smelled of earth and rosemary, the sun low enough to paint everything gold. Dee knelt in the soft dirt beside her raised herb bed, humming something old and slow under her breath. A wide-brimmed straw hat shaded her eyes, but Callie could see the frown line etched deep between her brows. She hadn't planted anything new in months, just kept pulling the weeds one root at a time, like she was trying to stop something from creeping in. Callie stood at the edge of the porch for a moment, arms folded across her chest. Her mind was still buzzing, but her legs had walked her here without question, like this was the only place they knew to go. "Dee," she said. Aunt Dee looked up slowly, brushing soil from her palms. "You're home early. I left after lunch." Shayla covered. Dee rose with effort, brushing off her knees. "Everything all right?" No. That single word hung heavy in the garden air. Callie stepped down into the yard. Her voice shook. "Do you know someone named James Whitmore?" Dee's hands froze mid-brush. Callie watched her closely. "He's been coming into the diner. Says he grew up here. Says I remind him of his daughter who went missing when she was a child." Dee didn't speak. "And today..." Callie's throat closed. Today he hummed a tune. "And I knew it. I knew it like it was written in my bones. I used to hear it in my sleep, before I even understood what dreams were." Dee's face cracked. Callie stepped closer, voice rising with each word. "He said his daughter had a birthmark right here." She pointed to her shoulder. "Just like mine. He's not making this up." Dee's eyes brimmed, but she blinked them away. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady. "Sit down, honey." Callie didn't move. "Please." They sat on the porch steps, the kind worn smooth by time and conversation. A breeze picked up, rustling the trees overhead. "I never meant to keep the truth from you forever," Dee said. "I just never found the right way to start." Start what Dee's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "Your mama Rachel came to me in the middle of the night. You were just a baby." She looked tired. Terrified. Said she had to leave Atlanta and couldn't take you with her. Said there were people she couldn't trust anymore, not even James. Callie's heart pounded. Why she didn't say much. Just that she was scared. Said she needed to disappear. "She asked me to raise you like you were mine. Told me if anything ever happened to her, you needed a home." Callie's chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. "And you agreed? Just like that?" "She was my sister in every way that counted. I would have done anything for her." Dee's eyes glistened. "I figured Rachel would come back when things calmed down. But she never did. She died." Dee nodded slow and heavy. "Cancer. Quick. By the time I found out she was already gone?" The world tilted. Callie pressed her palms to her face, letting out a shaky breath. "So you've known this whole time I knew pieces. Rachel didn't tell me everything. Just enough. Enough to protect you, I thought. You let me grow up without knowing who I was. I let you grow up safe." Callie stood up suddenly, her breath catching. "He's my father." Dee didn't answer. "He is, isn't he?" Callie's voice cracked. "Say it." Dee closed her eyes. "Yes." That one word hit harder than anything else had. It landed in her stomach and bloomed outward, hot and cold, all at once. Callie stepped off the porch and paced into the yard, arms wrapped around herself. "All this time I thought I was just ordinary. Forgotten. I looked in the mirror every day wondering why I didn't look like you. Why there were no baby pictures. Why I had that mark on my shoulder that nobody else in the family did. I wanted to tell you. But every time I opened my mouth, I imagined the way your world would change. And I couldn't do it. I deserved to know. You did." Dee stood slowly, and I was wrong to keep it. Silence swelled between them. Callie stared out at the road beyond the garden gate, her thoughts scattering in every direction. She felt like two people at once, the woman raised by Dee, and someone else entirely. Someone she didn't even know yet. Did he know she asked, finally? Did James know where I was? Dee walked toward her, slow and steady. "He came once years ago. I didn't let him in." Callie turned sharply. "You what? I was scared, Callie. Scared he'd take you away. I didn't know what kind of man he was. Rachel didn't trust him anymore. She left for a reason. But you don't even know what that reason was." "No," Dee admitted. "I don't." And I've lived with that weight every day. Callie dropped her head into her hands, the pieces swirling too fast to catch. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. You're still you, Dee said gently. Still kind, still strong, still the girl who stayed up all night with me when I had the flu. Still the one who gives extra bacon to the man who talks to himself at the diner because you know it makes his day. But I'm also Grace Callie, said her voice barely audible. Dee's eyes filled again. Maybe so. But whoever you were then, whoever you are now, you are loved. Callie wiped her face, forcing the breath back into her lungs. I need to talk to him. I know. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be ready. Just honest. They stood in the quiet together as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the garden. Callie felt her heart breaking and rearranging all at once, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion and pain, a strange sense of clarity began to bloom. For the first time in her life, she wasn't floating. She was tethered to a name, to a song, to a man who might just be her father. James stood at the edge of Forsyth Park, eyes fixed on the fountain in the distance. The sound of water spilling over stone filled the quiet morning air, but it did nothing to settle the ache rising in his chest. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He knew the number by heart. Franklin. He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he closed his eyes and breathed deep. Spanish moss swayed above him, slow and sleepy in the soft wind. Somewhere nearby, someone played a guitar on a park bench, low and mellow. Life continued unaware that for him, everything was teetering. He finally took the call. Well, he said, voice tight. Franklin didn't waste time. It's her James. The words fell into the space between them like stones dropped in water. No build-up, no easing in. She's your daughter. James let out a slow exhale like he'd been holding his breath for 22 years. How sure 99.9? DNA confirms it. James lowered himself onto the nearest bench. There it was. The truth. Not a theory, not a dream. Grace was alive, and she'd been calling herself Callie Monroe her entire life. How is she? Franklin asked carefully. Has she said anything? James stared out across the park. I told her about my daughter. I said she reminded me of her. That was all. But yesterday... His voice faltered. I hummed the lullaby. A pause. Franklin's voice dropped, and she knew it. The line went quiet for a beat too long. You're in it now, James. Whatever you do next, just make sure you're doing it for her, not for the man trying to make peace with the past. I know. He hung up. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was weight, like standing in front of something too big to hold but too sacred to walk away from. Sebam, Callie paced the narrow hallway at the back of the diner apron, balled in her hands. She wasn't supposed to be working today, but Shayla had texted an hour ago Diane called in sick. You okay to cover breakfast? She said yes before she had time to think. Maybe she needed the distraction. Maybe she needed the chance to see him. And now that she was here, she was already second-guessing everything. She caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror, flushed cheeks, lips pressed, tight eyes that couldn't decide whether they were angry or just broken open. Get it together, she whispered to her reflection. She stepped into the dining room just as the bell above the door chimed. He was there. James. She froze mid-step, but he saw her instantly, their eyes locked across the room. He stood. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly. I wasn't going to, she admitted. He didn't sit. He waited. I talked to Dee, she said. She told me. James exhaled relief and guilt laced into one breath. So it's true, she continued. You're my father. Yes. She looked down, picking at a thread in her apron. And all this time you didn't know where I was. I searched for years, Callie. Every road was a dead end. Your mother made sure of it. I don't blame her. I blame myself. She nodded slowly. Why I was too focused on building something. I thought if I created enough success, it would prove I was doing it all for my family. But somewhere in the process, I lost sight of them. Callie's eyes glistened, but she didn't blink them away. I don't remember you, she whispered. I remember you, he said gently. Every day. A beat passed. I don't know what you want from me. James hesitated. Nothing. I don't expect a relationship. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted the truth. And now that I have it, I just want to know you. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed even. It's hard to wrap my head around. One minute I'm a waitress trying to save up for nursing school. The next, I'm the daughter of a billionaire I've never met. James almost smiled. You're still both. She let out a quiet laugh, almost bitter. I don't know who I am. You're Grace. You're Callie. You're your mother's daughter and mine. You're strong and kind and brave enough to ask questions most people run from. His words weren't polished. They were raw, a little uneven. And they felt real. Callie crossed her arms. And now what, you want to take me back to your world of glass towers and charity balls? No, he said. I want to earn the right to walk beside you in whatever world you choose. Silence wrapped around them again. You know what I keep thinking about? Callie said suddenly. That lullaby. I used to hum it when I was scared. I didn't know where it came from. I thought I made it up. I used to sing it to you every night. James said, eyes misting. You'd grab my finger with your whole hand and wouldn't let go until the last note. Her face crumpled. Just slightly, and that was enough to break the dam. She turned away, wiped her face, then sat down in the booth across from him. I'm not saying I forgive you, she said. I'm not saying I understand any of this. I wouldn't ask you to. But I want to try to figure it out. James swallowed hard. That's all I've hoped for. She looked at him again, eyes still unsure but searching. We start slow, she said. You don't push. You don't show up with headlines or promises. Just coffee and conversation, James said. And maybe another biscuit. Callie almost smiled. Almost, and that almost was everything. James showed up the next morning with a paper bag and an awkward hopefulness that didn't quite fit his usual polished air. He stood outside Gigi's before the first customer had walked in, tapping lightly on the glass, like a man who wasn't sure he was allowed in yet. Shayla opened the door, her brows already raised. You brought food to a diner. He lifted the bag. I didn't come to compete. Just thought Callie might like something different. I passed this peach tart place she mentioned yesterday. Shayla gave him a look. You're lucky she's in the back, or she'd accuse you of bribery. Not bribery, he said carefully. A gesture. Shayla stepped aside, but not without a playful shake of her head. You billionaires and your baked goods. He stepped inside, the smell of fresh coffee and grits wrapping around him like a familiar old quilt. And just like that, the nerves returned. Yesterday had been a breakthrough. But today was uncharted territory, the day after truth. Callie came out a moment later, tying her apron at her waist, hair pulled up messily, face fresh from sleep. When she saw him, she stopped. I brought something, James said, holding up the bag with a hopeful smile. She squinted at it. That better not be a diamond ring, just peaches. Her lips curled despite herself. You remembered. I remember a lot more than I thought I did. Callie gestured to the booth. Go on then. Let's see if those rich folks know how to make a tart. They sat across from each other as the diner slowly came to life. Customers trickling in coffee pots, warming Shayla humming off-key to an old Dolly Parton song on the radio. James unwrapped the tart and slid it across to her. She took a bite, paused, then looked at him with mock seriousness. "You're still not forgiven. But this is helping." He laughed, and for a second the air lightened. "I wanted to ask you something," he said gently. Callie raised an eyebrow, guarded again. "Would you ever want to see where I grew up?" She didn't respond right away. "It's the house on East 41st, still standing somehow. I haven't been back inside since before." "You still own it?" "I kept it," he said. "I don't know why. Just couldn't sell it. Something told me it mattered." Callie looked down at her coffee cup, running her finger around the rim. "I'm not ready for big leaps, James. I still wake up wondering if this is all a dream. I understand. No pressure, just an invitation. You'd be welcome any time." Another pause. Then she said, "Maybe." A soft maybe, but not a closed door. James nodded. They sat there for a while, the quiet between them no longer heavy, just tender new. Then the bell over the door rang. A man walked in, late 40s, clean cut, worn khakis and a button-down sleeves rolled to the elbows. He had a confident gait, the kind you only get from living a lot of life, and when he spotted Callie, his whole face lit up. "Morning, Callie," he called. "Hey, Mark." She stood instinctively smiling in a way James hadn't seen before, warmer, more familiar. James watched carefully. Mark walked straight over to her, holding out a small brown envelope. "College forms you asked about. Printed them out for you at the office." "Oh, you're a lifesaver," Callie said. "Seriously, anything for you." Mark's voice softened. "You still thinking about nursing?" Callie nodded. "Trying to. Just need to figure out the money part." James listened silent. Mark glanced over and noticed James for the first time. "Oh, sorry," he said, offering a polite smile. "Didn't mean to interrupt." Callie hesitated. "Mark, this is James. James, this is Mark Benson. He owns the print shop off Whitaker. He's also one of the kindest people in town." Mark extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." James shook it. "Likewise." There was a pause, a quiet weighing. "Well," Mark said, backing away, "I'll leave you to your morning tart date." "It's not a date," Callie said quickly. James said nothing. Mark winked. "Right. Just two people sharing pastries at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday." Callie flushed. James offered a small smile but said nothing. When Mark left, Callie slid the envelope aside and sat down again, avoiding James's gaze. "Friend?" he asked carefully. She shrugged. "He's been there a long time. Helped Dee with groceries when I was little. Fixed my bike chain more than once. He's just solid." James nodded slowly. "You like him?" Callie's eyes snapped up. "Not judging," he said quickly, "just observing." "I don't know what I feel about anything right now," she said. "My life was one shape. Then you showed up and cracked it open. I didn't mean to, I know." Another quiet moment passed. "I guess I'm trying to figure out what parts of the old life I want to keep," she said. "And what I'm allowed to want now." James's heart clenched. "You're allowed to want anything," he said. "All of it." Her gaze softened. "Even both worlds?" "Yes." She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders eased. The diner filled with more voices, more clinking dishes. Shayla waved a spatula behind the counter, calling out an order. Callie stood. "Back to work." "Same time tomorrow?" James asked. Callie hesitated. "We'll see." But this time her maybe came with the smallest smile. And for James that was enough to stay. To wait. To hope. The heat of late morning settled heavy over Savannah, the kind that wrapped itself around your skin and slowed time. Inside Gigi's place, The buzz of conversation filled the space like background music, humming between the clatter of plates and the low whirl of ceiling fans overhead. But at one table near the window, things felt unusually quiet. James stirred his coffee even though he didn't take sugar. Callie hadn't come out yet, and he was starting to wonder if maybe she wouldn't. Yesterday had been better than he could have hoped. The tart, the conversation. The way her smile almost returned, it gave him something he hadn't dared let himself feel in years. Hope. But then Mark Benson had shown up, and James couldn't ignore the way Callie's face changed when she looked at him. There was a softness there, a history, something James couldn't touch. And maybe that was okay. Maybe it had to be. He was still turning that thought over when Shayla slid into the booth across from him without asking. "You're back," she said. "I told her I'd come back. Doesn't mean she believed you." James met her eyes. "Did you Shayla studied him? Still deciding?" He gave a tired smile. "That's fair. She's not like the women in your world," Shayla said, tapping the table lightly. "She's used to standing on her own 2 feet. She doesn't do fairy tales. She does dishes, double shifts, and fixing things no one else notices are broken. I don't want her to change." "Good. Because she won't." Just then the kitchen door swung open and Callie stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. Her eyes swept the room and landed on him. Her expression flickered surprise, then caution, then something else he couldn't quite name. She crossed the floor slowly, her posture straighter than usual. "Guarded." "I wasn't sure you'd show up again," she said. "I told you I would. You say that like it's easy." James nodded. "It's not, but I meant it." She sat, not waiting for an invitation. There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, just full of things left unsaid. "I need to ask you something," she said finally. "Go ahead." "Why didn't my mom trust you?" The question landed like a drop of cold water on hot stone, sudden sharp. James looked down at his hands. "That's not easy to answer." "Try." He took a slow breath. "I loved her. But I was distracted. My world was fast. Demanding. I thought success would keep us safe. I thought it meant stability, comfort. I didn't see how lonely she was getting." Callie watched him carefully. "Did you ever hurt her?" His head snapped up. "No, never." She nodded but didn't let him off the hook. "So what happened? I think she stopped believing I could protect the life she wanted. Or maybe she just stopped believing I was in it with her. One day she was gone. No warning. Just a note." Callie leaned back, arms crossed. "And you didn't try harder. I tried everything," he said quietly, "but she changed her name. Changed yours. Vanished. I hired investigators, spent money I didn't have. Years went by. Leads dried up. Grief turns into routine, and then one day, you stop expecting the phone to ring." The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. It made her chest ache in ways she didn't expect. "I don't remember her much," Callie admitted. "Just moments. A perfume. The sound of her laugh. Sometimes I think I've made those memories up." "You haven't," James said gently. She was warm. Strong. Stubborn. You have her smile. That caught Callie off guard. She blinked hard. "You sound like you still love her." James didn't hesitate. "I do." The words landed heavier than either of them expected. Callie looked away. "That's complicated." "I know." Another beat passed. Then she asked, "Do you have anyone, in your life now?" James shook his head. "There were people, but nothing real. I kept everyone at arm's length. I didn't want to repeat old mistakes." Callie pressed her lips together, thinking. And now he met her eyes. "Now I want to fix what I can. Be present, earn your trust, whatever that takes." She didn't answer right away. Then it's not just about trust. It's about time. We can't fast forward this. I don't want to. Good. Their conversation was interrupted by the ring of the front bell. Aunt Dee stepped inside, looking every bit like a woman who knew she was walking into the middle of something. She spotted James instantly. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Callie stiffened. "Dee?" "It's all right," James said, rising politely. "Of course." Dee sat slowly, folding her hands on the table. Her eyes met James's with quiet strength. "I didn't expect to see you still around," she said. "I don't blame you. You know you broke her wide open, don't you? I'm starting to understand that." Dee nodded once. "I raised her to be smart, cautious, independent. She doesn't trust easy. I'm not asking her to," James said. "I'm asking her to let me earn it." Callie looked down at her hands. I want to see the house." Dee and James both turned to her. "The one on East 41st, she said, meeting her father's eyes. "You said it's still standing." James nodded. "It is. Then show me." James smiled, the kind that didn't need words. Callie looked between them. "But no promises. I'm not ready to decide anything. Just a visit," James said. "Nothing more." Dee reached across the table and squeezed Callie's hand. "Whatever you find there, just remember your roots may be scattered, but your foundation is strong." Callie's eyes shimmered, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel lost. She felt ready. The old house on East 41st Street stood like a memory made real, faded blue shutters, a wide porch with worn floorboards, and ivy creeping along one side like time had gently wrapped it in its arms. It wasn't grand, not anymore. But it had the kind of presence that held stories in the walls, stories waiting to be remembered. James stepped out of the car and walked around to open the passenger side door. Callie hesitated before getting out, her fingers resting on the doorframe, eyes locked on the house like it might vanish if she blinked. "I haven't been here since I was 4, she said quietly. "You used to sit on that porch swing with a stuffed giraffe in your lap," James replied. "You'd sing to it while your mom watered the plants." She glanced at him, startled. A giraffe. His name was Buttons. You wouldn't go to sleep without him. She smiled in spite of herself. "I don't know how to feel about remembering nothing while you remember everything." "I only remember because I had to," James said gently. "Memories were all I had of you." They stood for a moment in that quiet space between past and present, then slowly made their way up the steps. James unlocked the door and pushed it open, revealing the stillness inside. The house had been cleaned but not staged. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and old wood. Sunlight filtered in through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns across the hardwood floor. Callie stepped in slowly, like her shoes might make too much noise. Her eyes scanned everything, the tall windows, the arch between the living room and the hallway, the staircase curling gently upward. "It's smaller than I imagined," she said. "You were small when you left." She ran her fingers over the back of a dusty armchair. "Did you live here long after we were gone?" I tried, but the silence got too loud. "Eventually, I moved into the city. Couldn't bring myself to sell it, though." She nodded. "It doesn't feel like a stranger's house." James tilted his head. "That's good, right? I think so." They moved through the rooms slowly. James showed her the kitchen where Rachel used to make cinnamon pancakes on Sundays. The dining room table where Callie had spilled juice on an important contract, and he hadn't cared one bit. The hallway where tiny handprints still faintly marked the wall near the floorboards. When they reached the staircase, Callie paused. "Is my room still?" "I didn't touch it," James said. She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand brushing the banister. At the top, the door to the right sat slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The room was simple, A twin bed with faded bedding, a white dresser, a small bookshelf with a handful of worn storybooks, a cracked lamp, a toy chest in the corner with a giraffe sticker peeling off. Her breath caught. James stepped in behind her, his voice low. I didn't have the heart to change it, just kept it clean. I guess a part of me believed you'd come back someday. She moved to the toy chest and knelt her fingers tracing the edge of the sticker. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside were a few dolls, a blanket, a rattle, and nestled beneath them a small, well-loved giraffe with a crooked neck. She pulled it out with trembling hands. "This is Buttons," she whispered. James nodded. Callie sank to the floor, cradling the toy against her chest. "I don't remember this room," she said, "but it feels like mine." James lowered himself beside her. "You used to line up your toys in a parade. Every morning. You'd make them march across the room while you sang, 'You Are My Sunshine.'" Tears slipped down Callie's cheeks. "I don't know how to carry this," she said. "It's like I just found a life I didn't even know I lost." James's voice broke. "And I don't know how to give it back to you." She looked at him. "Why do you still want me in your life?" He blinked. "You're my daughter. I don't even feel like the same person. You don't have to. You're not a memory. You're here. And I want to know you as you are now, not just the little girl I lost." She studied his face, searching for cracks for hesitation. But all she saw was sincerity, raw and human. The moment stretched, and then Callie leaned her head against his shoulder. "I don't know how to be a daughter," she said. "You don't have to know how," he whispered. "We'll figure it out together." They sat like that for a while, two people caught in the quiet in-between of grief and something like grace. Eventually, they went back downstairs. James made tea while Callie wandered through the rest of the house. She stopped in the den where a small collection of framed photos lined the mantel. Most were old, his college graduation, a black and white of his parents, a candid shot of Rachel holding a baby in a sunlit garden. She picked it up, her hands trembling. The baby had a full head of dark hair and her eyes. "Is this me?" she asked, as James entered with 2 mugs. He nodded. "The last photo I have of you and your mom together." She stared at it for a long time. "Can I keep this? It's yours." Callie placed the photo carefully in her bag, then took the tea he offered. They sat on the couch, sipping in silence. Finally, James spoke. "There's someone you should meet. Someone who's known this story almost as long as I have. Who Franklin? My business partner. He helped me search for you. Spent years chasing dead ends. He was there the day we got confirmation." Callie hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but not today. Whenever you're ready." She looked around the house one more time. "Maybe I'll come back here sometime. Just to sit. Think. It's yours whenever you want." She smiled faintly. "Thanks." They stood. On the porch, the light was beginning to change, slipping toward late afternoon, the same light that once filtered through her childhood windows. "James," she said softly. He turned. "Thank you for not giving up." His eyes welled. "Thank you for letting me try." And in that quiet, sun-washed moment, something began to heal. Not all at once, not perfectly, but real and honest, and slowly starting to take root. It was just after 7 when Callie let herself into Aunt Dee's house, the old screen door creaking behind her like it always had. The scent of something warm and familiar. Rosemary and garlic wafted from the kitchen. The kind of smell that said everything was going to be okay, even if nothing made sense yet. She dropped her bag near the doorway and paused, her eyes still adjusting to the cozy yellow light inside. Buttons, the giraffe, peeked out of the top of her tote. Aunt Dee appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Well, she said, not even trying to hide the curiosity in her voice. How was it? Callie gave a tired smile. Emotional. Sit, I'll fix you a plate. You don't have to. I made enough for leftovers, which means you're eating some now. Callie followed her into the kitchen, slid into the chair at the little round table that had been her homework desk, therapy couch, and comfort zone for the past 18 years. He showed me the house, she said quietly. Dee didn't turn around. She just nodded, pulling baked chicken and mashed potatoes from the oven and stove. It looked almost the same as I remember it, Callie continued. Which is strange, because I don't actually remember it. But somehow it felt familiar. Dee placed the plate in front of her, then sat down across from her. Sometimes memory doesn't live in pictures. It lives in the body. The way something smells. A floorboard that creaks. The echo of laughter in a hallway you didn't know you missed. Callie took a bite of the chicken, chewing slowly. It scared me a little. How much of my life happened without me knowing it? Dee's face softened. That's not your fault. I know. But it still feels like there's a whole version of me I'll never get back. You don't have to go back, Dee said gently. You just have to keep going forward, piece by piece. They sat in silence for a while. The old clock on the wall ticked steadily, a sound Callie had always associated with home. Then Dee asked, Are you going to see him again? Callie didn't look up. I think I want to. And what about Mark? That made her pause. I don't know. He called today, Dee added casually, though her eyes flicked up to watch Callie's reaction. Oh, Syed, he just wanted to check on you. Said he'd give you space, but he was around if you needed to talk. Callie ran her fingers along the rim of her glass. I've known Mark since I was a teenager. He's always been good, reliable. But maybe I didn't realize how much he meant to me until everything else started shifting. Dee didn't press. She just gave a knowing nod, then stood to put the kettle on. Tea, Callie smiled. Always. The next morning, Callie returned to the diner early before the first light had filtered through the windows. She needed the rhythm of routine, the clatter of plates, the sizzle of eggs on the grill. Normal things. But it wasn't long before the normal twisted into unexpected. Mark walked in just after 8, the usual confidence in his step dimmed a little by uncertainty. Callie was behind the counter pouring coffee when she saw him. Morning, he said, his voice easy but hesitant. She gave him a quick smile. Hey, you've been kind of quiet. Yeah. It's been a lot. He nodded, pulling off his baseball cap and twisting it in his hands. You've got every right. I can't imagine what it's like. She set the coffee pot down. Honestly, neither can I. It's like I've been dropped into the middle of someone else's story. Mark leaned on the counter. But it's still your story, Cal, no matter where it started. That stopped her for a second. She looked at him, eyes softening. I've known you longer than anyone, he said. And I've never seen you shaken like this. But I've also never seen you give up. You've always been the strongest person I know. Her throat tightened. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I'm barely holding things together. He reached across the counter just enough to graze her fingers, then let someone help. She didn't pull away. Just then, the bell over the door chimed again. James. Callie's breath caught. She glanced between the two men, James standing near the door in his usual tailored jacket, and Mark still close, still warm, still waiting. Should I go? Mark asked quietly. She shook her head. No. You're fine. James approached slowly. Didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't she said, her voice neutral but kind. James glanced at Mark. Good to see you again. Same here, Mark said, offering a nod. There was an awkward pause. 3 people, 2 of whom had known Callie for most of her life, in completely different ways, and one of whom had only just found her again. Callie broke the silence. Can we sit for a minute? James nodded. Mark hesitated, then joined them in a nearby booth. It was odd sitting like that, Callie between the man who might have raised her and the man who had, in small, meaningful ways, helped her grow up. James started. I've been thinking about what comes next. Not just between us, but in terms of your future. I know you were thinking about nursing school. Callie blinked. I was. I'd like to help with that. Not as a favor. As a father. Mark's eyes flicked toward her, surprised but unreadable. Callie inhaled deeply. That's generous. But I don't want money to confuse things. It doesn't have to, James said. It's not a debt, it's support. I'll think about it. James nodded. Mark turned to her. Whatever you decide, you won't be alone. The words were simple, but the way he said them, they meant something else entirely. Callie sat back, heart thudding with the weight of choices she didn't know she'd have to make so soon. 2 men, 2 parts of her life, both offering something real. But the future. The future was still hers to decide. The sky over Savannah had turned that deep shade of lavender that only lasted for 10 or 15 minutes before the dark took over. Callie stood at the edge of the old dock behind Aunt Dee's house, watching the water ripple quietly beneath her sneakers. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest, her mind louder than the cicadas in the trees. Everything was shifting. Too fast. In 1 week, her life had cracked open, revealing a history she never knew she had a father she wasn't ready to claim, and a man she'd known forever suddenly looking at her like she was the one thing he didn't want to lose. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Footsteps followed slow and steady. She didn't turn around. I figured I'd find you here, James said softly. I needed air. He stepped beside her, leaving a respectful space. This place feels more like home than anywhere else, doesn't it? It's the only home I remember. They stood in silence for a beat. The wind stirred her hair, brushing it across her cheek. James spoke again, voice low. I didn't come to convince you of anything. Just to talk. If that's okay. Callie gave a small nod. I spoke to Franklin this morning, he said. He's been helping with the paperwork, the official process of restoring your birth certificate, getting the old records straightened out. She stiffened. So it's really happening. Legally. It doesn't have to happen until you're ready. Nothing does. But it's already in motion, she said, her voice tight. Everything feels like it's running ahead of me. James hesitated, then said, I'm sorry. I should have asked before starting anything. Callie looked out at the water, her reflection barely visible in the fading light. I don't know how to be her. Grace, I mean, that's what's on the records, right? But it doesn't feel like me. You get to choose what name you keep, James said gently. It's not about erasing who you were. It's about honoring every part of you. She exhaled shakily. And what if I don't want to be anyone's daughter? What if I just want to be Callie the waitress who sometimes dreams about nursing school and is scared out of her mind? Then that's exactly who you get to be, he said. You don't owe me anything. Her eyes welled suddenly. Why are you being so patient? Because I wasn't back then, and I lost everything. The quiet between them stretched heavy with old regrets and new wounds. James spoke again, this time with something different in his tone, something less rehearsed. I loved your mother, more than she probably ever believed. But I was too caught up in chasing something I thought would make life safe for us. Money, power, prestige. and I missed what actually mattered. Callie's voice cracked. "Why didn't you go after her harder? I did," he said quietly. For a long time. But eventually the trail ran cold. I thought maybe she wanted it that way. And I didn't want to cause more pain. Callie wiped at her face, frustrated with her tears. "You were a ghost to me, a question I never asked out loud. And now you're real, and standing right here, and I don't know how to fit that into my life." "I don't need a place in your life," James said, emotion edging into his words. "I just want to give you the chance to decide what you want on your terms." Callie turned to face him, really seeing him. Not the billionaire. Not the man in the headlines. Just the father who'd carried grief quietly for 2 decades, and now stood in front of her raw and real. "Mark told me he loved me," she said suddenly, the words surprising them both. James blinked. "Did you know he was going to know? It just came out. We were standing by the register yesterday and I was closing out the till and he said it like it was the most natural thing in the world." James nodded slowly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And how did it make you feel?" "Scared," she admitted. "Seen?" "Safe and completely overwhelmed." James offered a small smile. "That sounds about right. I told him I needed time. I didn't tell him everything that's going on. I don't even know how. You don't have to explain your whole world to someone to let them stand beside you. If he really loves you, he'll walk with you through it." She looked back at the water. "I think part of me loves him too. But I don't know if it's the kind that lasts or just the kind that feels good when everything else hurts. That's for you to figure out. And you will. In time." The sun dipped below the trees, leaving only the soft hum of twilight. "I don't want to lose myself in all this," Callie whispered. "You won't," James said firmly. "You're stronger than all of it." She didn't speak, just leaned slightly against the rail, her shoulder brushing his. He stayed still, letting the moment be whatever she needed it to be. Finally, she said, "Can we go back to the house tomorrow? I want to see it again. Maybe spend a little time there." His voice cracked a little. "Of course. Whenever you want." She nodded, the weight on her chest loosening just a little. And for the first time since the truth unraveled, she felt like maybe she was starting to put the pieces together. Not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly, with room to breathe. The morning was quiet. Not heavy or restless, just the kind of calm that felt earned. Savannah's streets still glistened from the early mist, the light catching on brick sidewalks and iron fences as Callie made her way to East 41st. This time she didn't hesitate. James was already waiting outside the house, leaning on the porch railing with 2 cups of coffee, steam rising into the soft morning air. He looked up when he saw her, and there was a gentleness in his smile, like he'd stopped trying to impress her and started just being present. "I made it strong," he said, holding out a cup. "Didn't know how you take it," Black Callie replied, taking it. "No sugar." He raised an eyebrow. "Like your mother." I figured. They stood side by side on the porch, sipping quietly. The house looked different today. Not less worn or more polished, just more hers. "I kept thinking about what you said," she said. "About choosing what I want for myself." James nodded slowly. "I meant it. I'm starting to think I don't have to figure it all out right now." "You don't." She looked at him. "But I do want to know more. About you, about her. I want to understand the whole picture, even if parts of it are messy." James's throat worked as he swallowed. "It's messy. I won't lie to you." "Good," she said. "I'm done with pretty lies." He chuckled just a little. "Your mom used to say the same thing." Callie smiled faintly, but her eyes remained serious. "I want to start coming here sometimes. Not just to visit, but to make it feel like mine. Not just your memory of me. Something new. His voice softened. You can make it whatever you want. I might paint, she added, surprising even herself. I used to sketch sometimes. Not great, but it cleared my head. I'll stock the place with canvases if that's what you want. No, she said with a smirk. I'll get my own. You don't have to fix everything, James. He looked down, sheepish. Old habit. She stepped inside and he followed. The house felt less like a museum today, and more like a place that could breathe again. She wandered towards the back, stopping in what used to be her mother's reading room, now just an empty space with filtered light and dust dancing in the sunbeams. James leaned on the doorframe behind her. She used to sit right there, he said, nodding to the corner near the window. Wouldn't move for hours, just her and a book and a cup of tea. Callie ran her fingers along the windowsill. You loved her. I did. Callie turned to face him. Did she love you back? James's face folded into something complicated. I think so. But she loved peace more. And I stopped giving her that. There was a long silence, then Callie whispered, I think she did what she thought was right. But she never stopped carrying the weight of it. I never stopped carrying both of you. Her eyes shimmered again. But the tears didn't fall. I don't want this house to be a shrine, she said suddenly. I want it to be a place that holds stories, not just grief. That sounds exactly right. I don't want to live here full time, she added. Not yet. But I want to come here. Be here. Learn this part of myself. You're welcome anytime. She turned back toward the living room, and they sat on the old couch again, sunlight warming the faded cushions. For a long while they just talked. James told her stories, funny ones, small ones, about how she once threw spaghetti on the ceiling at 2 years old, and how her mom cried from laughing. About the way Rachel used to hum when she cleaned a tune, James still caught himself humming sometimes without even realizing it. And Callie listened, really listened. Until she wasn't just hearing about the past, she was filling in the missing edges of her own story. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it. A message from Mark. Thinking of you. No pressure, just here. James noticed the flicker on her face but didn't ask. You can answer it, he said gently. Callie stared at the message thumb hovering, then locked the phone and set it face down. Later she said. James didn't press. Instead he said Franklin would still like to meet you when you're ready. He spent years helping me search for you. He deserves a face to go with all the hope he held. I'll meet him, Callie said. Not today, but soon. James nodded. That's more than I could have asked for. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Time slowed again, just enough to notice it. Callie glanced around the room. You know what this place needs. What, a dog? James laughed genuinely. You think Buttons would approve? She grinned. Buttons has been retired. Time for a real sidekick. He looked at her, this woman, his daughter, who he was slowly beginning to know, and said, Then let's find one. Callie stood brushing off her jeans. But you don't get naming rights. Deal. They stepped out onto the porch again, and this time she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like someone who belonged. Even if the story wasn't perfect. Even if the ending was still being written. It was late afternoon when Callie walked into the diner not to work, but just to sit. The sun poured in through the windows, casting gold across the tables, and for a moment everything felt almost normal. Familiar. Safe. Shayla looked up from behind the counter, eyebrows raised. You're early for your shift that doesn't exist today. Callie smirked. Just needed a place to breathe. Big day, big week. Shayla poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. You got that storm in your chest look again. Callie wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth ground her. I spent the morning at the house again. James met me there. Shayla gave her a long, thoughtful look. And how's that going? Callie paused. Better than I expected. Worse than I know how to handle. Sounds about right? He's not pushing, Callie added quickly, which makes me want to trust him more, but also makes me wonder what I'm supposed to do with all this space. You don't have to fill it all at once, I know, but everything's shifting. And then there's Mark. Shayla leaned forward. Ah, yes. The love complication. He's been patient. Kind. But I feel like I'm two people now, and I don't know which version of me he wants. Maybe he wants both, Shayla said gently. Callie looked down. I haven't told him I've been seeing James more often. I think I'm afraid if I say it out loud it becomes too real, and I'll have to pick something. Or someone Shayla added. Callie's phone buzzed. Another message from Mark. Dinner tonight, just us. No pressure. Let me know. She read it twice. I think I need to go, she said, suddenly standing. If I keep avoiding it, it's going to build into something it's not. Shayla nodded, supportive but cautious. You sure you're ready? No. But I don't think I'll ever be really. She got in her car and drove. Her hands were steady, but her chest was tight, every breath feeling like a question. When she pulled into the little parking lot of the Pearl Mark's favorite hole-in-the-wall seafood place, he was already there, leaning against the railing, dressed down in jeans and that well-worn flannel shirt she used to steal in the winter. He turned when he saw her. His smile was soft, unsure, hopeful. You came, he said. I said I would. He opened the door for her, and they slipped inside. The place smelled like butter and lemon and salt water. They were seated near the back, the clatter of dishes and quiet conversations forming a protective barrier around them. Neither of them touched the menus. I should have told you sooner, Callie began before he could speak. About James, about everything. Mark nodded slowly. I figured you needed space. I did. Still do. But I also didn't want you to feel like I was hiding something from you. Callie, he said gently, I've known you since you were 17. I've seen you at your loudest, your quietest, your angriest. Nothing you do surprises me, but it still matters. She bit her lip. So you're... Okay, I'm not sure what I am, but I know I care about you, and I'm trying to make room for whatever this is turning into. She looked at him, really looked at him, the way his fingers curled around the edge of the table, the crease forming at the corner of his eyes, the steadiness in his voice even when it trembled just a little. I don't want to hurt you, she said. Then don't walk away before you give us a chance. That landed hard. She reached for her water, took a slow sip, then set it down. I don't know what us looks like anymore. Mark leaned forward. You don't have to define it tonight. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. I don't know what I feel, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything's tangled up right now. He nodded. Then let it be tangled. Just don't shut me out. A pause. Then she reached across the table slowly and placed her hand over his. I don't want to shut you out, she said. I just need time to know what's mine, what memories, what feelings, what dreams actually belong to me. Mark turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. Then take it. I'll still be here. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Not sadness. Not fear. Just something too big to hold in a single breath. They sat like that until the waiter came and went and came again. They ordered. They laughed softly, slowly. And when the check came, Mark didn't reach for it. He slid it toward her. "Your turn," he said with a smile. Callie laughed through the ache. "Fine. But next time you're buying dessert." Mark stood as she did, walking her to her car. She paused by the driver's side door, not getting in yet. "Thank you," she said. "For dinner. For staying." He touched her cheek gently just once, then let his hand fall. "Callie, I'd wait for you through every version of yourself." She didn't kiss him, not yet. But something opened inside her. A little more room to breathe, a little less fear. And as she drove home, the lines between her past and her future didn't feel like walls anymore. They felt like doors. The next morning came with a kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, just full of pause, like the world was giving her a minute to catch her breath. Callie sat on the porch at Aunt Dee's, a blanket draped over her legs, mug in hand, watching the first flickers of sunlight dance across the trees. Aunt Dee stepped out a moment later, robe wrapped tight, her own mug steaming. "Didn't hear you come in last night," she said, settling into the chair beside her. "Was late," Callie murmured. "Went to dinner with Mark." Dee arched a brow but didn't push. "We talked," Callie added, her voice soft. "It felt real. Not simple, but real." Dee smiled into her coffee. "That's a good kind of real?" Callie let the silence stretch. "Then I want to show you the house." Dee turned to her, surprised. "I've been going more. James has been meeting me there. It's strange. Every time I go, it feels less like someone else's story and more like, I don't know, like the roots I didn't realize I missed." Dee nodded slowly. "You think you're ready for that? I don't know if I'm ready, but I think it's time." Later that afternoon, Callie drove them out to East 41st. The sun had settled higher, casting long shadows over the house's front steps. The paint still peeled in the same places. The creak in the porch swing was still there, but it felt warmer now. Familiar, not haunting. James was already inside when they arrived, the door open, music playing low from an old Bluetooth speaker. Something soft and jazzy. When he saw Dee, he straightened, polite but unsure. "Mrs. Harrison," he greeted. "Delilah, please," she said, holding out her hand. "It's been a long time." James took it carefully. "Longer than I deserve." They stood in a mutual pause, one heavy with history and protection. "She's grown into a remarkable woman," Dee said, not smiling, not frowning. "That's her doing." "And Rachel's." James nodded, humbled. "I never doubted it." Callie stepped between them gently. "I thought it might help, if you two saw what this looks like now. It's not just about the past anymore." They walked the house together. Callie showed Dee the corner, where she thought she used to play, the hallway, where a pencil mark from years ago still scratched the wall low to the floor, just her height once. James pointed out the room he'd kept as his office. "I used to sit in here late thinking I had all the time in the world." Dee looked around, arms crossed. "Time's a tricky thing. We waste it thinking we can earn it back." Callie watched them both. Two people who had been central to her life in very different ways. Two parts of her truth finally sharing the same room. Later, they sat in the living room, sunlight pouring in like a blessing. "I've been thinking," James said quietly, turning toward her, "about legacy, about what I leave behind when I'm gone." Callie blinked. "What do you mean I've built businesses? I've made money, but none of it has meant as much as this, as you, and I want to make sure you have something that's yours, not out of guilt because it's long overdue." Callie frowned. "James, I don't want, let me finish," he said gently. "I spoke with my attorney. I'm placing this house in your name. I've also started setting up a scholarship fund in your mother's memory for single mothers in Savannah who want to go back to school." Callie's breath caught. "You don't have to take anything you don't want," he said, But I want you to have choices. I want you to have power over your own story." Her eyes stung. "I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything." Aunt Dee reached across and placed a hand over Callie's. "He's giving you a door, baby. Doesn't mean you have to walk through it today, but it's yours now. That matters." Callie stood up, overwhelmed. She stepped outside, heart pounding. The air hit her sharp, fresh. She sat on the porch steps and let the tears come quietly, not from pain, but from the magnitude of everything converging at once. Her past, her future, her choices. A moment later, James stepped outside. He didn't sit, just stood a few feet away. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "But I want to be worthy of the space I'm asking for." She looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "I don't know what forgiveness even looks like. Maybe it's not a grand moment. Maybe it's just these little ones stacked together." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Will you come to the diner tomorrow morning?" He blinked. "Of course. Why I want you to meet someone," she said. "Someone who stood by me through everything." James understood immediately. "Mark, I need you to see where I come from. Not just what I lost, but what I've built." He smiled softly. "I'd be honored." And in that moment, something settled between them. Not perfection, not closure, but something real. A bridge. The morning light streamed through the wide diner windows, casting a soft glow over the worn linoleum and booths that had seen generations of coffee conversation and quiet dreams. Callie stood behind the counter, apron-tied hands smoothing the edge of the register more out of habit than necessity. Her nerves hummed beneath the calm she wore on the outside. Today was different. She glanced at the door, then back at the coffee pot that had just finished brewing. Shayla came up beside her, slipping an order slip onto the rail. "You okay?" Shayla asked, low enough not to be overheard. Callie gave a soft smile. "Not sure, but I'm here." Shayla squeezed her arm. "That's something." The bell above the door jingled. James stepped inside. He wasn't dressed in one of his tailored suits. Instead, he wore a simple navy sweater and jeans. He looked out of place in the best way, like someone who wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Callie waved him towards the corner booth. The one near the window. The one she always sat in after shifts when the world felt too heavy. A minute later, Mark walked in. He spotted her instantly, giving that slight smile that always started in his eyes. He wasn't sure what to expect, and she could feel it in the way he moved. Careful, hopeful. Callie met them both at the booth, heart racing as she sat across from them. "Thank you for coming." Mark nodded. James gave her a small, steady smile. "I didn't bring you here to fix anything she started. I just needed you both to know each other, to see each other." Mark glanced toward James, then back to her. "All right." James leaned forward. "It's good to meet you, Mark. I've heard... not much, actually, but I know she trusts you. That's enough for me." Mark gave a respectful nod. "She's everything to me." Callie inhaled deeply. "This is all of this, it's still unfolding. And it's messy. But I'm not running anymore." She looked at James. "I don't know what kind of father-daughter relationship we'll have, but I'm open to finding out. Slowly, at my pace." James's eyes softened. "I'll follow your lead." She turned to Mark. "And you? I can't promise I'll always have it together, or that I'll be easy to love." Mark reached across the table and took her hand gently. "I don't want easy. I want real." The diner faded into background noise. For a few minutes, it was just them. The three lives that had collided in ways none of them expected now, learning how to move forward without tearing each other apart. Later, when the coffee was down to warm sips, and the moment had settled into something calm and grounding, They stepped outside. James held the door open. "I should head back. Let you two have the day." Callie stepped forward, and with a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, reached out and hugged him. Not tightly. Not long. But it was real. He held her gently, like someone holding a second chance. When they parted, James looked at her with eyes rimmed in quiet emotion. "Thank you for letting me in." "Thank you for showing up," she said. He walked down the sidewalk, slowly disappearing into the street crowd like any other man. No spotlight, no headlines. Just a father who was learning how to love with his hands open. Mark stood beside her, quiet. "You sure you're all right?" he asked. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm not sure of anything. But I feel more me than I ever have." They walked together, no destination. Just footsteps, sinking, shoulders bumping. Later that week, Callie returned to the house. Alone. The light through the windows was soft, late afternoon warmth that kissed the old floors and walls. She walked room to room barefoot, listening to the sound of her own breath in the quiet. In the corner of the reading room, she'd placed a canvas. Blank. A small table with brushes sat beside it. She picked one up, dipped it in the blue. The first stroke was shaky. The second was bolder. She didn't know what the painting would become. But for once, she didn't need to. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees like a whisper from her mother. And in that moment, Callie understood. Healing wasn't loud. It didn't crash in like a storm or scream its arrival. It came quietly on mornings where you still showed up, in voices that said, "I'll wait," in decisions that felt terrifying and brave all at once, in blank canvases, and in the choice to pick up the brush anyway. She smiled through tears. She didn't bother wiping away, letting them fall. Letting it all be real. Because she wasn't lost anymore. She was becoming.